Hi, and welcome to a new series. In this series, we are doing Alyssa critiques Alyssa. And in this one, I'm gonna look back at some of my older maps, and we're going to take an honest look at them with my eyes and art style today. And we're gonna talk about what I would do differently, if anything. Now, obviously, with my maps from 30 odd years ago, I'm probably going to have more critique, but today we're starting with one from only about 10 years ago, and this is the city of Taux, Taux, for R. Scott Taylor. It was going to be originally for a book series, all based on the city of Blackgate, and we were going to be drawing a series of city segments. The city was a metropolis. This is just one part. And the book series never got the traction that they really wanted. They had some incredible writers involved. But, success is success is success. And if you don't get what you need, then you just can't find reason to continue. So unfortunately, we only ever drew one piece. So I guess the first thing, if I had any control over this, I wish I could draw the rest of the city of Taux. But that said, or the city of Blackgate. But that said, what would we do differently with this? How did I draw it? What medium? What styles did I use? And what would I do differently now? Well, let's take a deep dive on this. But first, I'm actually going to show you the black and white version. Pretty different, right? So this was actually drawn ink on paper. And there's a few things that resulted because of that I would now do outright differently because I draw digitally. So that said, let's take a deep dive. Now, you can always tell, by the way, my ink work because it's very black and white. Yeah, and I don't mean that, to be a snarky bugger, but you can see that I can't get fine shades of grey. It's either on or it's off, particularly when it comes to dots. You see these? And on my digital maps, I can get them a little finer. I can outright actually do them grey if I wanted to. But it's all about pen pressure size, and you've only got a certain amount of control when you're drawing ink on paper. So one of the first things, honestly, if I was going to redo this map today, I would not do it ink on paper. I would draw it digitally. There are some structural things that I would do with this differently as well, which we will talk about. I've just noticed this. You see this line right across? I don't know what that is. But apparently that's one of the pitfalls too of ink on paper. If something kind of gets screwed up, it's screwed up. So, but let's zoom out. Let's zoom out. The city of Taux, ink on paper. So let's take a large picture in, okay? Things I like about this map. I generally like the structure of it. I do like the fact that it is a stadium. You can see that has been taken over by housing projects that get a little bit more opulent as you head over towards, I'm going to call it the west side over here. But over on the east side, very cluttered, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Very cluttered kind of slums as you come through the main gate into where there used to be gaming going on. But let's zoom out a little bit further than that. If I was going to do anything differently on this map today, this area around the stadium, I think I would actually tuck my buildings a little closer to it. I think I would actually have some buildings right up against the walls of the stadium. Why not? If you were building in the city of Taux and there's a stadium there, especially it's an old stadium, right? I mean, you can see that by the way that it's been taken over. I think that it would spill out beyond, and if you've got like these big huge brick walls standing there, I think I would put more buildings up against the outside edge, and I would follow the shape a little closer. You can see my road kind of swoops away, more following the shape of the river. I don't think that would be the case. This massive structure here, the roads would follow that more closely, right? We've kind of got this curve here that doesn't exist in the stadium, and it doesn't exist in the wall. I think that's fine. if I was drawing it nowadays, I would probably follow this edge of the stadium a little closer, like so. I think the road position may be the same. It would just do less of a swoop. So feel a little bit more symmetrical. This road over here, I actually like at the top. So like this road right up here. I kind of am okay with that because I feel like it's hugging the side of the wall that little bit closer. So that's good. Generally, on the other roads, I'm okay with them. I think they're fine. Also, just a note, I'm going to zoom in on this wall over here. Again, ink on paper, so there's only so much you can do. This way of actually doing hills, I actually like doing this sort of style for the hills. That's my style right there. Digitally, I can get a little bit more refined, but I'm okay with those. Digitally, I can make the ground texture look a little bit different. I'm okay with those. Likewise with the trees. This is kind of still my current style. While I do it digitally, the wall I'm okay with. I might try to actually, obviously if we're doing this digitally, I can make these actual castellations here be a little bit more uniform or actually fill the gap completely. But the fact that we've got the battlements complete with some stairs coming down, kudos to the Alyssa of 10 years ago. That's not bad work. That's pretty good. But what would we do differently? Well, you see how I used to actually try and get shadow by doing stippling? You can see it here. You can see it here. And you can even see it alongside the edge of the wall. You see this? You got the tower here. You got this here. These stipples are one thing that I would actually not do nowadays. I wouldn't do any shadows in the inking stage. I do it in the colouring stage now. So I don't do this. I'm not even quite sure why I used to do it in the past. But even as recently as 10 years ago, I did. And I really liked doing it. This is maybe one of the last maps where I did this. And I guess if you zoom out, it definitely gives a sense of elevation, which I kind of like. And if I was going to do ink on paper and not colour it, then sure, maybe something like this. But I think I would actually do it with a finer pen, if that makes sense. A lighter hand. It's particularly prevalent over here. And I can see what I was trying to do. Let me zoom in here. You can see that I'm trying to get the elevation of these walkways above the slums and such. And then the elevation of the actual walls themselves. I just feel that there's a better way to do this nowadays. I would be inclined, honestly, to come back through with a pencil afterwards and do some proper shading, even if I wasn't going to colour this. But this stippling, that's one thing I would not do. So that's one slap of the wrist of old Faden. I guess it'd be young Faden, wouldn't it? So, generally speaking, though, not bad. I don't tend to do this type of texturing on my roads. I don't think it's necessary. Nowadays, I actually draw the brickwork, if anything. So I would probably approach this texturing a little bit differently. I do this, though, on the river. You see, like, I've got these little ripples. I continue to do that today, and I'm okay with it. Now, one thing I don't do, though, is you notice how around the docks, I kind of evenly do this, and likewise on the other side. And it's almost symmetrical, because watch, I do that. I'm actually... There's no flow here. There's no river flow. So nowadays, I decide what way the current is flowing. And I will do that. And I'll do this. But I won't do it on the other side. Because this almost suggests that there's like a little ripple hitting the edge of the dock, right? And so I'll kind of do this type of thing. But then I'll just flow the water past. I won't hook it back underneath. I don't think that is particularly realistic. So water flow, I definitely have refined over the last few years. Just notice this. What's that? Like, what is that? Interesting docks, sure. But come on, Faden. Come on. What the heck is that? I wouldn't do that. Like, don't do that. Anything else? Anything else? Well, you know, the rest is not too bad. It's not too bad. Especially ink on paper. But then let's talk about the actual types of buildings that I've got going on here. So I want a little bit of a marketplace in and around the gate. So I think I've definitely got that going on. I tend to draw more tents like these two puppies right here nowadays. Like interesting shapes to them. I even do tents now that have like little awnings, etc. out front. So I think I would do this a little bit more interesting to look at. So a little bit more of this mixed in here. And if anything, honestly, I probably would spill out deeper into this area right here. I'd occupy it. I'd make it like a merchant tent city. On the walls, so we've got the battlements here, and I've got some buildings on the walls. Nowadays, I would have buildings overhanging the walls. I just like that look, you know. This is a slum area. And I think it's great when you break the straight lines with some an insinuation of buildings kind of on top of each other and maybe slightly overhanging the wall below. Doesn't have to be like ridiculous in amount, but it makes more visually. It makes a map more interesting visually to look at. So we come in underneath the gate and we then come up onto some big steps that are kind of dropping down. Okay, this is fine. I think the steps are fine too. I think the buildings, I would have clustered them a little bit more around these steps. And it's almost a little bit too patterned, too uniform. It's like we've got building hut, building hut, building hut, building hut, building hut. You see that? I'd not noticed that before. So I would probably vary that up a little bit. I do tend to draw my slums like shanty towns. So a little bit more irregular in shape and overlapping shapes a lot more. Less of these alleyways going between them. Clusters of shacks against each other. Then do the alleyway around the cluster. So I actually feel that maybe there's too much white space going on here. That the buildings actually should be leaning against each other a lot more. Again, getting rid of this stippling. It's actually only making things a little bit more confusing. And I do have these elevated walkways. Now, I do elevated walkways to this day. There's nothing wrong with that. The stippling would have to go. I would do more steps. I would add a lot more steps in this area. How are people getting up and down? You know, rickety walkways. I would do a lot more of that. I would probably redraw this entire section, in all truth, because of that. Shacks leaning up against each other. A lot more stairs and walkways joining the elevations. And I'm maybe only seeing 2 or 3 elevations here, including the ground floor. I think I would try to actually stack it. I would stack it majorly so. Now, as we come down into the actual play area here, I think this is generally speaking not bad. I actually kind of like this. It looks like I've done some kind of marketplace in a sunken pit here. I kind of like it. I'm okay with that. Good job, Faden. You did all right there, girl. This is an elevated play area. Again, okay, I wouldn't do the stippling quite that way. It's a little bit harsher. And the actual markings on the field, honestly, I'd probably do it during the colouring stage. Because that way I could have like green field and white lines or something. This elevated area, I think this is, by the way, in the book, is actually a tavern. A stacked tavern. I kind of like it. No changes there. You did okay. Good job. Don't know what this is. I think it's another playing field. No, it's a dueling field. That's what that's meant to be. And I think I would do this differently nowadays. I like my military sort of areas I mean, this is okay, but I would have some fences or something around. I'd have more of a sense of people like walking between these areas, and these areas would be heavily scuffed up. I'd probably have one or two buildings inside here. Where are they storing their equipment? Is there some kind of like, commandant or sergeant who's got to have his office quarters down here? So I think I would make this more populated versus just a hole in the ground with some discs on it. So I'd probably redraw that. I don't know what's going on here. I think this is meant to be some kind of park. And I don't know. So here's the deal. If I was going to change anything, I would actually, honestly, make this more clearly a park, More trees, perhaps. Maybe the addition of a pond in there. Visually, you should be able to look at something straight away and go, that's a park. You know what I'm saying? But as it is, I look at that and go, I think it's a filled pit of grass or something. We come up now to this area here where we actually have 3 tiers of gardens. And this isn't bad for ink on paper. This is not bad. I'm going to come back to this in the colouring phase because I actually think the colouring could have been better. And I'm going to show you that right now. And then we come up into this top area. So here's where my critique of this. This is where the rich people are meant to live. And for the most part, not bad. We've got big buildings here. Really nice, swanky. I approve. I would not redraw any of those. We've got some big buildings going on here. Look at these. I would not redraw any of that. And you can't really get between the layers, via steps or anything. They've got their secluded estates. I like that. I'm going to come back to it, though. Here, though, I don't get that sense. I think it's like a garden or something. But it feels almost too loose. Like, I've got some paths kind of coming off over here, but it doesn't go anywhere. And likewise, I've got this coming in below, but I don't see any way actually to then pop out, at least to the top area. I think I might have put some steps or something coming down out of these towers. I would have made this visually a richer looking garden if I was to go redo it today. So these corners I really like. Not such a huge fan of everything in between them. And these are meant to be fountains. I don't do this watering here anymore. That's almost taken, by the way, from an old school style, when you get little pool of water in the dungeon and they have these uniform symbols on it. That's fine for an old school map. It's not fine in this context. I actually would have the ripples following the outer edge if I was going to ripple it at all. Otherwise, I would just add a little bit of water texture during colouring. So I would get rid of the water texture there for sure. Generally speaking, not bad. What we're looking at road shapes. We're looking at get rid of that stippling. Probably redoing this area completely. I'm trying to make the gardens a little bit more garden-like. This area is not bad. This, I would completely redo that. And I would redo this. Generally, I would score myself I'd give myself an 8 out of 10 on this, if I'm going to be honest with you. Also, we've got tents, like merchants or something going up here. You'll notice that these are the types of tents I was referring to before that I would put up here. I would probably, honestly, do less of these star tents, I'm going to call it. I do like the fact that I added a circular tent in there. That's nice. I think, actually, now I'm thinking about it, I think this was the area of like a crime lord or something, and all of his people are living in tents, and so he's out on the west side over here. So generally not bad. You know what I would do different now? I would actually position the tents more in a cluster around like campfires and things like that. Not carts, because we're up elevated. Actually, you know what I would do? I would have cranes. I would have handmade cranes up on these elevated areas, which is how they get stuff up and down. That would add a lot of personality to this. That's one thing I definitely would add. But yeah, generally speaking, there's a good solid 7 or 8 out of 10. I don't want to mark like Alyssa as low as a 7, but I definitely feel like there's a good few areas where I would tweak some things. So let's give her an 8, shall we? Let's talk about the colouring real quick. Firstly, Oh my god, doesn't this transform the minute you add some shadows, proper shadows, less stipples? The stipples are now almost completely hidden, by the way. I think this is a lot clearer. This map, coloured, pops. It freaking pops. The only critique I have of the colouring on this one is the shadows aren't consistent. We have some shadows that are coming from a light source this direction. I mean, look this. That's a great shadow. I love this. Look at the elevation that we have here. Shadows are everything. That's beautiful. But we also have some shadow here. And here. And here. So I feel like the shadows are like... Where's my light source coming from in this? Is it coming from here? Or is it coming from here? And I feel like this map is doing both. In fact, there's some areas where I see... Like, I'm seeing shadow over here too. I mean, look at the wall. Look at the wall. So we're definitely... I want to be more consistent with my light source. I tend to now always do this. That's just my rule of thumb. Light source, top left. Unless I have a good reason to do otherwise. It's particularly jarring, by the way, in this area. You can see that we've got a shadow for the pit here. Emulated here. But then we've got a shadow of the actual hotel here. So I don't want to nitpick, but that's an inconsistency that I think could be easily addressed. So I would definitely take a deeper look at the shadows on this one. I do love how the elevations are just popping off the map, including this area here. Not bad at all. The towers look high, the walls look high. The actual stadium itself just looks like it's towering over the city around. Likewise with the walls. Look at how wonderful those walls look. Also, I'm going to give myself a big plus for this water here. That's a great water effect. And we're actually moving back into this after experimenting with different approaches over the last few years. I like this. This is really, really good. It's solid. One thing I will say, by the way, you'll notice this here, this ink work. I actually purposely drew a balcony overlooking the bridge going over the water because I felt that would be really cool as a visual story hook in a way. Like, you can imagine people on the balcony, people watching traffic coming and going over the bridge. I think in my head this was a brothel or something. And I could just imagine, you know, young ladies and men hanging out on the balcony there going, hey there, sailor boy. You know, that type of thing. So I'd like to try and add things to my maps that have feeling behind them. They have people actually using them. And that balcony is one. I do that all of the time today. My only other critique of this map, and my biggest critique, is the shadows are inconsistent. Too green. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful map. But if I was to change this at all, I think the green on the stadium is good because it's meant to be overgrown. But by making the buildings green in such density like this, the whole map is green. And I think it would be a wonderful contrast to have wooden shacks, tin shacks, coming into marble buildings over here, to be honest with you. Brick and stone buildings over the other side. And that would help the gardens and the parks pop off the map. As it is, my gardens are blending with everything else because the whole map's green. And I don't think they should be. These are lived-in buildings. I don't think everything should be green like this. So, overuse of green. I mean, I'm kind of okay with it here, but you know what else I would do differently? These would be multicolour tents. These would be vibrant colours, and they would pop off the map. I would do colours that strongly contrasted with the green, and I wouldn't use green at all for any of the tents. And if I did, I would stripe them. That way that it's not just green on green, right? So, too much green. Inconsistent shadows. Lovely, lovely, lovely water over on the side there. Here's another one. Look at the shadow of the fountain here. We got another light source. So there's that's my critique. Too much green. 3 light sources. 3 light sources. But otherwise, a beautiful map. I'd make the walls, honestly, I'd make the walls grey. And that would really stand against the rest of the green. Like, we've got a little bit of mud and stuff going in there, so that's great. I think more of that in the interior here would have made the whole stadium stand out more. It's a little bit like when you're painting miniatures, right? Contrasting textures, contrasting colors help a lot. They'll help another piece pop. And so here, this just all blends a little bit. That's my only critique of the coloring. Coloring now, I'm going to give it a solid 8 or 9 out of 10. If we were going to redo it a little bit, it would just be less green. And let's get our shadows right. So maybe an 8.5, something like that. So that's overall a great map, a great visual map. We're going to nitpick it a little bit. Some things stick out. If we redrew it today, I think we would get a stronger result. I think we'd get a stronger result. I would also have more personality on this map, by the way. You know, I would just add little details, more stories going on in the map itself to really draw us in. So there was a little bit more of, oh, is that a dead horse? Or is that a tipped over cart over there? That type of thing. But that's what we've been doing in recent years. So I can't blame younger Alyssa for any of that. She was working ink on paper. So that's episode 1 of Alyssa Critiques Alyssa. Hopefully you had fun. I'm going to be doing this with all of my maps, so watch out for the next one. Special shout out to all of my Twitch subscribers and Patreon supporters. I love you all. Thank you very much. I will see you all on the flip side.